The thing that surprised me about this World Cup was actually the brazenness of the situation around the Balogun red card. Of course, the US got battered in that game and then left the World Cup. So people are sort of taking it as that was a bit naughty, but it didn't really...
on.
But that's quite scary to me.
It is.
Because then what happens next?
There are times where you are listening to an Infantino speech and you're listening to those things and you're going, he genuinely does believe himself to be some sort of saviour and enfranchiser of this sport. There are also times where he says something, you go, mate, please, how much money?
Oh, you mentioned America. Do you think America will win their first World Cup before England win their second? Hello and welcome to the Fourcast with me, Jordan Jarrett-Bryan. Now, the World Cup is nearly over. Spain and Argentina will contest the final after England's hopes ended in semi-final. Again. But while the football is coming to an end, the arguments around this tournament may only just be beginning. From the controversial disciplinary decisions to political flashpoints and mounting questions over governance, FIFA and its president Gianni Infantino have been at the centre of the tournament's biggest rows. So has Infantino gone too far? Has FIFA become too political? And who, if anyone, can hold one of the world's most powerful sporting bodies to account? Joining me to discuss all of this is broadcaster and football journalist Kate Mason and Carl Anka, football writer from The Athletic. Guys, as I mentioned, it's not quite over the World Cup. We're in the final few days, final to come. But let me just start off by getting your overall thoughts on the World Cup in comparison to what you thought it would be to what it actually has ended up. Let's start with you, Kate.
I was out in New York just before the start of the World Cup, and it was interesting talking to American citizens about their thoughts on the World Cup because, particularly in New York, the Knicks were about to win. And so actually the level of interest in soccer, there was a lot of clarification. So I'd be like, I work in football, soccer, the World Cup is coming. And quite often people there would say, oh, yeah, great.
That's cute.
Yes, you know about the Knicks.
Got bigger things over here happening.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my impression of the reception that it was likely to receive. And then I went to a few events talking about how the World Cup was going to work from an American perspective, from a US perspective. And I remember being told that the World Cup final, which is yet to come, is going to be the biggest sports entertainment event in history. That was how they were pitching it. And I thought, well, that's exactly right. That is the attitude of the US to soccer. And I was intrigued to see how that would play out and if they would embrace it. And frankly, they have, right? Yeah. I think it's fair to say that it looks to me as though the stadiums have been pretty well packed, despite what we thought about the pricing. That asks a lot of other questions about whether people should be spending that much money on things like this. But as a spectacle, it's been a big success.
What about you, Carl? Because I don't know about you, but I was really skeptical about whether this would be the best. It would be the biggest, but the best World Cup ever. Lots of talk about climate issues, all the travelling across 3 countries, ticket prices, the political interference that possibly could happen before the World Cup. What were your thoughts on how this would play out pre-World Cup to what actually we've seen in reality?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, in that there were a number of people who had watched several World Cups and were very aware of the, shall we say, increasing sports entertainment, WWEification, Americanization of football. And many believed that this World Cup would be one of commerce and dollars. And while it would be a very good television product, if you scratch the surface or went peeking in places where various elements didn't want you to go peeking, you would find the ugliness and the stories that have unfortunately affected the majority of World Cups held in the 21st century. So I would not say this is a American or North American exclusive phenomenon. However, in the moment when you're watching television in high definition and you're buying product via your phone or laptop, it's all very thrilling.
There was also a lot of talk about the political elements that would be involved in this World Cup because of where the World Cup is and the current administration in the United States. Has it gone beyond what even you predicted what would possibly happen?
Has this World Cup necessarily had a greater or smaller amount of political interference than, say, the Qatar World Cup or the 2018 World Cup? And I'd say sort of, it's been different. Okay, the political concerns and the human rights concerns that were quite rightly directed towards the Qatar World Cup, and the amount of migrant workers that died and or injured and or had their passports taken away from them in the building of some of those stadiums is very, very different to the political concerns about people trying to get into the country of the United States, and also how many people from around the world and players were treated in the United States. However, as many people will say, this has very often been the way of the World Cup. The 1934 World Cup was held in Mussolini's Italy. The 1978 World Cup was held under a military dictatorship in Argentina. There have been big capital P politics involved in World Cups pretty much since the start of the World Cup. I would say this is another different strain of that, but one that cannot be avoided all the same.
Okay, let me ask you. I mean, I agree with Carl. Politics and football have always been entwined, and in some ways, I think they kind of should be to some degree. But does this one feel a little bit different? Does it feel on this World Cup we've got to a new level whereby World Cups going forward, the relationship between political leaders and whoever's running FIFA at the time, it's gone to another level now? And if so, how concerning do you think as football lovers should we be?
The thing that surprised me about this World Cup, or the elements of the World Cup that were in the States, we should be clear, there were 2 other countries involved in this one, was actually the brazenness of the situation around the Balogun red card. Mm-hmm. That did actually surprise me. Yes. I didn't think that in this era of politics around major sporting events, even in this President Trump era that we've come to understand means different things, and that institutions are going to be treated differently under his presidency, especially the second time round. I didn't expect to see what seems to amount to interference with a live result in a game of football.
Because it's more than surprising. It's quite shocking that the president of a country can make a phone call to the president of the person who runs the world game, football. And, he says, I didn't tell him to change his decision. I just asked him for a review. That level of, and how fast it happened as well. That's a whole nother level of scrutiny that's required, surely, for how decisions are made within the game of football.
It surprised me as well that it was viewed, so that conversation is with Gianni Infantino, and his take was that, it's very normal for the president of FIFA to be having conversations with the president of the country hosting the World Cup. And he has never said, yes, Donald called me and therefore we did this. But of course, the president of the US went out and tweeted or put on True Social, cheers FIFA, thanks for doing the right thing. And perhaps it's not, it could also be that the president of the US is exaggerating the impact that he had on this. But the fact is, we don't know, right? But what's interesting about it now from the perspective of people like us who are interested in what this all means is that, of course, the US got battered in that game and then left the World Cup. So people are sort of taking it as that was a bit naughty, but it didn't really.
Move on.
Yeah. But that's quite scary to me.
It is.
Because then what happens next?
Well, let me ask you, Carl, because on Infantino, I mean, there's a lot of football fans I know that don't like him, don't like how he runs the game. There are a lot of nations that are questioning many of his decisions in running the sport. But this felt another level. How does he credibly go forward now as the leader of football across the world, having been outed almost by Donald Trump, who says, look, I made a call and look, I didn't tell him what to do, but they kind of knew what to do. How does he, going forward now, credibly run this game, having had this decision that, as Kate was saying, we've never seen this before?
Will he retain his credibility in, let's say, Western Europe and among the UEFA confederations? Probably not. Does that matter? Not really. UEFA is one of the smallest confederations within FIFA, and even though it is the richest one, it doesn't have as many voting blocks or as much voting power as the other ones combined. So Infantino will do something that his predecessor Sepp Blatter did very well, which is, it doesn't really matter if you annoy UEFA, as long as you keep everyone else happy, satisfied, and well paid, which he has done tremendously with this World Cup.
Well, he would, I'm sure, would argue that he's not paying federations to keep them on side, but he's definitely got a large block.
He's not paying them, but he is helping them earn more money than ever before. And this was the big thing about pushing to 48 nations. This was the big thing about having talking about advertising. This is the big thing he made very clear at the World Cup draw. This was going to be big. It's going to be the biggest World Cup ever. It's going to be a Super Bowl. It's going to have ticket prices really, really big. Infantino's interpretation of his job is, I make sure all of the FIFA members earn more money so they can have more games to do whatever they wish. And his version is, for everyone to have the most amount of money, you have to have more games than ever before, or maybe more World Cups than ever before, which is why throughout his presidency, we've heard this conversation about him possibly having the World Cup every 2 years without even doing the UEFA nations. And that got shot down. So I went, okay, well, let's now have a 48-nation World Cup with more matches, because that means more money. That means more broadcasts. His interpretation of his job is, how do I make sure everyone involved gets paid? And his way of doing that is seeded draws. So the superstars all meet at certain points. So you guarantee bigger TV product. It's more advertisements where possible / hydration breaks. He's getting everyone paid.
And I'll come to you, Kate, on this one. It's largely reported that he will be in situ for a fourth term, and a bit like the current political situation in this country, no one's going to run against him. So it's likely that he will be the fifth president for a fourth term. How does anybody hold him accountable? Because there are certain federations and lots of football fans, football lovers that don't like how he's running the game. Is there anything that we can do as the media, as fans, as stakeholders in this sport that we love, to ensure that he's held accountable for decisions that he's making, which many people don't like?
That is a great question and a big challenge. And I think the thing about football is that while it is the global game, while it is watched by billions of people who care about it so much, the people who are responsible for it and who are in charge of the game in different nations and in FIFA at the top of it are a very small coterie of largely men. So it's a challenge to understand how anything can be brought to bear on people who are fundamentally doing what they see as the right thing for football, in that what Carl is saying, which is that everyone earns a lot more money now in the Gianni Infantino era than they did in the Sepp Blatter era. You know, when Infantino came in, there were holes in the finances, and he can say, "Oh, look, I've dealt with that." And this is a hugely powerful organization that has a lot of resource and controls this asset, which is football. That is the thing that so many people all over the world, including perhaps us, love more than anything else.
Well, FIFA's argument, they say that all the money generated from World Cups goes back into the sport. They spend that money in ensuring that it is the world game. They will spend money in parts of Africa, in parts of the Middle East, where they will say football really needs more investment, and it doesn't go into his back pocket. So they will say, actually, growing the game and having more teams and more games at a World Cup benefits the world game. Is that an argument that you think stands up? Because even just this World Cup alone, we have seen some of the African nations do really, really well. Now, we can discuss how the funding for those nations has ensured that they are better than they were maybe 10, 20 years ago. But that would be the thing that he would point to and say, look, there's 3 or 4 African nations there that have done really, really well and continue to do well. That's where the money's going. Is that something that you think is a justifiable reason for expanding World Cups? Or do you take Carl's view that actually, ultimately, this is about more games, more broadcasting, means more money for everybody involved?
Yeah, I think it's hard to judge it in a way that's not a little bit cynical. Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's some fantastic examples of good work that's been done with some of the money. For sure it is. But I think the distinction that football fans generally feel is that running FIFA is running a business. Now, of course, with your general, whatever your business is, the idea is you want more people to know about it, great, and you want to earn more money for your shareholders. That's basically business, right? And so in this instance, it doesn't matter too much about the fundamental, about football's soul, if you like, if I'm not to sound too kind of embarrassingly romantic. But this is why many people have been so upset about the hydration break. So the fact that football, which has, since it was invented in 1860 or before, but in the 1860s, since the rules were codified, has been played in halves. It's now been played in quarters. People are speaking about quarters, and that is how they're analysing the game. Now, you could say, Kate, don't be such an old stick in the mud, quarters, halves, who cares? But the fact is, this is
We're tampering with what football's always been.
Exactly. And there's an alchemy. I can't explain to you why football is the game that has just seized the imagination of so many people all over the world, but it has done, and it means so much to people across the world. And that has to have come from something fundamental in how the game is played. The fact that it's effectively low scoring is something to do with it. The transition in, like, you can go from hero to villain in about 2 seconds, as we saw in the England-Argentina game. But because of all that, we don't know why it has done this, but it has this quality that has captivated generations of people. And for there to be bureaucrats who can just tinker with that without having any kind of scrutiny, it seems, or being beholden to anybody who loves the game, that's frightening to me.
Carl, I've just got back from the States, and I was there for the semi-final between Argentina and England. There was 80,000 fans from both nations that were there, just there because they love their nation, they love football. But I spoke to so many fans that were paying incredible amounts of money for tickets. Yeah. And it left me thinking, as I mentioned it to Kate earlier on, do we have to just accept now that the game is no longer with the fans, and it hasn't been for a long time? And going forward, if you're going to go to a football game at a World Cup, you have to pay a lot of money for tickets. Are fans powerless? And bar boycotting games, there's nothing fans can really do to bring back football to a level that is affordable and feels like their game. Am I being romantic now?
That's such a large question. Thank you for asking that one.
It's all right.
Fun. Okay. Right. How do you do things when you feel powerless? You're never powerless. You always have the power to do something. You need will, and you need to do it in numbers and volume and repetition. So if you're talking about boycotting a World Cup, it's not enough to boycott one World Cup. You need to boycott several World Cups repeatedly, and that will send a message to whoever is in charge that you don't want to do that. In case just blown her cheeks out, because it's difficult, right? This is very very hard making what you can describe as moral, in air quote, financial decisions about things that you care about very deeply. And you can have this about musicians or artists that you deeply love, but perhaps have gone down or express views that you no longer share. It's very, very hard to say, I love this thing, but for me to continue to live my life the way I want to live my life, I'm not going to keep spending money on that thing. Mm. Or you can do, I'm going to keep paying money to go watch these games, because these are indeed once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. I'm not ashamed to admit I very much view my life in World Cups. When I get to the start of a new World Cup, I go, oh, what was I doing 4 years ago? I was doing this, I was doing this, I was doing this. I'm also now thinking about what I'm doing at the next World Cup, how old I'll be, where I'll be living, what sort of family situation will I have. These are things constantly in my mind. When England got eliminated, one of my friends messaged me going, I really want England to win the World Cup while my dad is still alive. And that's how people's minds think. And it's very, very hard to talk to anyone who thinks about the game in that way, to go, actually, in order to preserve the soul of football, the best thing we can all do is switch off and not engage for a little bit. Because, as you say, there are many different viewpoints and nothing is truly binary. I can be sat here as we're all sat here living in the United Kingdom in our lovely UEFA nation with one of the world's richest FAs, and point to problems that Gianni Infantino has done in terms of ticket prices, in terms of taking World Cups to nations that perhaps are their voting processes in order to win these tournaments is perhaps not the clearest. And we can point our fingers and claim various things to which other football fans in other places as well be like, would you stop? You British people haven't been great when you were in charge of FIFA. And actually, Infantino's reign, much like Sepp Blatter's reign, has been very, very fruitful and very, very successful. 9 out of the 10 African nations got out the group stage at this World Cup. And a huge reason behind that is because of greater investment from FIFA into the African nations. Now, did Infantino do that out of the kindness of his own heart and because he wanted more African nations in the World Cup? Or did Infantino do that because, much like Sepp Blatter, he realized, CAF has loads of voting blocks. If I can get them on side, I can make sure I will remain FIFA president again and again and again. Now, the answer is probably both. There are times where you are listening to an Infantino speech and you're listening to those things and you're going, he genuinely does believe himself to be some sort of savior and enfranchiser of this sport, and he's emancipating the masses by taking football to different parts of the world. There are also times where he says something, you go, mate, please, how much money?
Kate, off the back of my question there to Carl about, Carl says you're never powerless, you always have some power in terms of the fan base and what they can do to try and steer things back their way. It might be a difficult decision to make, but you do have some power. Do you tend to agree, or do you think it's gone too far and it's now too big and fans have to just accept, unfortunately, this is the way the game is, this is what it costs, and if you want to be involved, this is what you've got to do?
Infantino, if he was here, would probably say, well, look, these games have been, broadly speaking, great at this World Cup, more goals per game than ever before at a World Cup. And perhaps that's due to, as he tried to say at the start of the tournament, these helpful hydration breaks have actually made the game better. When I see those sort of things being put out, you know that this is about him wanting to influence things in a way that will improve matters from his perspective. Now, of course, he's in charge, right? So I guess he can kind of do what he thinks is best. And to Carl's point, if he puts more money into federations in Africa that need it and that are benefiting from it and progress is made, whether he's doing that so that he can potentially achieve more votes in those parts of the world or from the good of his heart, it almost doesn't matter if the outcome is a positive one. I guess the question from my perspective is, are these outcomes positive? And that is a debate between me and Gianni Infantino, which I feel like I'm probably not going to win. But from the perspective of someone who loves football, I think this is obviously we're back to politics again, but politics that are kind of conservative versus socialism politics, right? Who owns this? Is it capitalism or is it the people, the workers, the people who want to watch the game? Now, instinctively, I feel like it's owned by us who love it, but practically that's not true, is it?
No, yeah, and I think it's something that I struggle with for sure as well on that one. Carl, let me just ask you about whether, is there a little bit from the three of us potentially, and I could be wrong here, a little bit of pearl clutching in terms of what we think the game should look like and how it should be run? Are there people, do you think, in other parts of the world who are like, no, we're quite happy with the World Cup. It's fine. It works for us. It is an element of maybe where we are and what we do. We want things to change and be improved by what we define as improvement. But actually, the rest of the world, other parts of the world, maybe like, no, we're pretty good. This works for us.
Possibly. Look, this is a World Cup final on Sunday that's going to be viewed by 1.3 billion people. Okay, I cannot profess to talk for anyone other than myself, and I know very much that my opinions on the game are personal. Look, I am 35 years of age, and I grew up in the United Kingdom. I am very, very aware now that what I believe the game of football should look like and should be, and what FIFA are currently trying to turn the game into, are two different things. And so be it. And yes, these ticket prices are ridiculous. And while a lot of people went to watch a lot of big games, such as yourself, for England and Argentina, I also know people who went, look, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I can't afford this one. I'm going to save my money until the next tournament. Well, hopefully, if Infantino takes this tournament away from North America, he might realize, oh, actually, I'll lower the prices. This has been a very expensive World Cup because FIFA believed the North American consumer would have a greater appetite to buying more product. And he has been vindicated in those views. For the most part, there have been far fewer empty stadiums than many people expected. But there were people that went, no, that's too much for me. And I think that is valid.
FIFA also say, Kate, that they prohibit political statements from anywhere around the game or in the stadium. But we did see in the semi-final between England and Argentina, the La Malvinas banner shown by some of the Argentinian players. Are we going to find out now if FIFA are going to show a little bit of teeth? And because even if you compare the Balogun red card and how fast that was overturned in comparison to, it's been 2 days now, we've heard nothing in terms of a sanction. Is this going to be a test of actually whether FIFA really believe their own parts of their own charter?
Yeah, it's intriguing, isn't it? And you worry. Generally, I think the big concern from my perspective is when you look at the Balogun thing, what we're talking about is whether this is a slippery slope. And then if you do this, then you can allow people to do that. And that's, I think, why it's a smart call not to allow political statements in the context of the World Cup. I think it would benefit. It's going to be a fascinating call because I think it benefits FIFA to actually clamp down on them. But also, you can just fine them 40 grand, and they're going to
They can say we did something.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
No.
They can then uphold what is smart for them, which is to try and limit political statements. Although,
Yes.
we've seen all the political statement is not letting Iran come into the country until the day of their game and making them blah, blah, blah. So they've, it's just I think this one's kind of a simple one that they can put down and point to as an example of good governance.
Yeah.
And so I assume that is what happens. But if you think about how much money Argentina are going to earn as a federation for winning the World Cup
The fine is punitive.
or getting to the final, then it does.
If they were to win the World Cup, of course, yes, of course.
Let's say.
Indeed. On the final, Carl, let me ask you about the fact that it's Argentina and Spain. Is there a concern that the World Cup and even the Euros, I know that's under UEFA, are going to be won and banded between 4 or 5 nations, right? And I'm just wondering if you reckon there's a chance that, we've seen Morocco in the last couple of World Cups now do really, really well. You mentioned 9 of the 10 African nations that were at the World Cup qualified from their groups. What are the chances of us seeing new nations winning World Cups, or at least getting to finals in the next, let's say, 10 to 15 years?
10 to 15, difficult.
Yeah.
30 to 40, I think it will happen. I mean, if I will say this World Cup has made it very clear that the gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots, has got smaller than ever. When you're looking at Cape Verde's triumph to get out of that group stage and how they went toe-to-toe with Argentina, and Sidney Lopez Cabral will be a pub quiz hero and a national hero, as will Vozinha as well. Now, if you are outside of, let's say, the 12 richest or the 12 most storied nations in the world, you need a number of things to go right to get a World Cup winning squad. First of all, you need a golden generation. You need a group of players that are all of World Cup winning quality, and you need to make sure that those players don't all play in the same position, right? It's all well and good having 4 great people all emerge that are 16 years of age, but if they're all fullbacks, then you ain't going to win a tournament.
No.
So Morocco right now make good fullbacks. They don't necessarily make great wingers and forwards. So their defensive scheme is very, very good. Their build-up and their attacking play a little bit prosaic. You need a large population and or a decent amount of infrastructure in order to build that. So what's also been interesting at this World Cup is certain nations that perhaps were very, very successful in the 70s, 80s, and 90s falling away and losing their rub to what we'll describe newer World Cup nations because they've rested on their laurels. Brazil, this was the first World Cup where Brazil was not a favourite, where the Brazilian media were not expecting to win the World Cup, and that is unprecedented. The Netherlands lost to Morocco in the round of 32, and several members of that Moroccan squad were born in the Netherlands, which is another interesting, fascinating detail to this World Cup, in that this is perhaps the first proper World Cup where, due to differences in FIFA rules, we are seeing more people across the global diaspora go, I'm not going to play for the nation I was born in, I'm going to go play for the nation of my parents. So more first and second generation immigrant children playing for Morocco or France or DR Congo, which I think is fabulous. So you need those things to go right. You also need to make sure you have a hell of a coach, and you need to make sure one of your great players that you've developed somehow is a goalkeeper, because if you want to win a World Cup, you need to be prepared for at least one penalty shootout. I would say right now, the United States, which is the richest economy in the world, is probably 30 years away from getting to a World Cup semi-final, reaching a World Cup final. And therefore, if you are looking at a nation like, say, Morocco, I think there will be consistent World Cup quarterfinalists going forward. But to take that next step, you are hoping that somewhere in your center of excellence, which Morocco has, you eventually find a way to unearth and refine the next great footballing superstar.
Carl, can I just ask you a question on that before I kind of wrap up my positive question, I think, at the end for the two of you? Oh, you mentioned America have the the financial infrastructure to do well in the next 30 years. And with the politics that we've seen in this World Cup in particular, and Trump won't be there forever, do you think America will win their first World Cup before England win their second?
No. Absolutely not.
Okay, you think they're too far away from? There's too much
No,
work.
I think the American, one of the key problem for the United States and the United States soccer culture is that they fundamentally made football, soccer, a middle class sport with the pay to play element, and unfortunately, the amount of money it costs for the average, for the average teenager or the parents of a teenager to take their child to soccer games and soccer tournaments across a season is it's $2,000 plus. And if you do that, you're just shrinking your talent pool. Whereas in England, we still have Hackney Marshes and other places where football is still, it's not as cheap as it could be. It's not as cheap and accessible as it is in, say, Norway, which is another great success story. But I think that will mean England will get to a World Cup final and hopefully win that World Cup final within the next 30 years, whereas I think the United States are 30 years away from reaching a semi-final.
Have you been drinking the US Kool-Aid? Is that where the question has come from?
Maybe I have.
Is that what you think?
I don't. I just find, because I agree with Carl. I think they're set up financially for who can play football. It's a middle class sport in America, so I think it's harder, and they are shrinking their pool, as Carl said. I just wondered if, with the influence politically they have, the finances and the population, if there's a chance they could do the next 4 or 5 World Cups. Just to wrap on a positive one, what has made you think, you know what, in amongst all the kind of doom and gloom, that was what made me still want to watch the World Cup?
I've watched so much football over the last however many days it is. And I mean, that is the single answer probably, isn't it? Just the chance to watch all of these games, all of which, even, I know I said about the fact that you could get through as the best third place teams through from the group stages, even if those games didn't really mean anything, they all meant something, right? Because this was a chance on the world stage for some of the players that Carl's already mentioned, the Cape Verde guys, like Curacao, or you saw what it meant to Ecuador to beat Germany. The things that really mean something to people are seeing there still, whatever we think about it in nationalism or being proud or thinking about your country in daily life, the pride of putting that on that jersey as a player, but also as a fan, and being able to be a part of that with your fellow countrymen or people who have perhaps in the US decided to support a team just because they quite like the player and they've got a chance to maybe see them. There's just something so... I wrote about it a bit, thinking about Wonderwall and the England team singing with the fans at the end of games after wins. And just that collective effervescence, it's called, where you get as a group into a shared space and you all kind of want the same thing and you're all rooting for that to happen. And it's the barriers between humans, between individuals, are broken down in that moment. And that is something, other sports can do it too, but because of the nature, the global nature of football, it's such a special place for that. And being able to break down your boundaries and become part of the collective, I think, is something that can really solve a lot of problems in the world. So I think that's what the World Cup can still offer to us and Jordan. That's why it needs to be protected.
Carl, we've still got a final to come, but have you been left with a sour or a sweet taste in your mouth as we wrap up this World Cup?
A sweet taste. Look, the World Cup it's really hard to have a bad World Cup, right? It's very, very hard to have a bad World Cup because football is amazing and there is always 2 or 3 dozen moments within a World Cup where you are watching a game or you are watching images of people watching a game and you realize the fantastic quote from Anthony Bourdain that people fundamentally are more or less the same. We all kind of we all love our children. We all love our friends. We all, if we have food, we like sharing it with people around us. If we can share it, we all want to hug each other. Really, actually,
these are good things. We like this.
and football allows us to do this. It's that amazing moment where you are watching a game of football and something happens and your body, collective effervescence, and you are so overjoyed that your body cannot contain it. And the only thing you can do is turn to the next person next to you and go, please hug me, and shake with me in this joy. And World Cups will do that. And that's why having it every 4 years is fantastic. That's why taking it around the world is fantastic. It's why I can sometimes get teary up when I'm watching people in Brazil. Children in Brazil get so excited about people. I don't even speak Portuguese, but I know what they're saying. And that's the joy of a World Cup. So I love football. even if the footballing business or the business side of football can make it very unpleasant from time to time.
And on that note, Carl, Kate, thank you much for your time. It's been very, very interesting. Don't forget, you can catch the Fourcast on where you get all the places you get your podcast, audio, and on YouTube as well. Until next time, take care.